This is part 2 of the series where I explain step by step how to create this enclosure. If you want to see how I created this design, click on the link below to see the first part. Now this is the part where I assemble the enclosure. In this video I'll show you step by step until the final product. This is a video where I go in depth into the technical part of the process, so I'll leave all the steps with timestamps so you can follow along and not get lost. To glue the pieces there are several types of glue. If you have the time, I suggest a PVA glue or wood glue. They're great to hold and make a firm and flexible seal. But if you don't have that much time, or if you're putting it together by yourself, I suggest using super glue, so you don't have to hold it for too long. I made my first version with super glue and it's perfect. So I will repeat it today. I must leave a note, the piece is laser cut so each piece must fit perfectly, but there are some cases where when cutting the joints they can misalign in a matter of millimeters. If that happens, just use the printer's pliers to cut the ends and fit normally. For the cutting machine, I placed it as organized as possible inside 6 sheets of 80 cm by 90 cm. I made this project already thinking about a thinner wood because it can be exchanged for other materials such as acrylic. The project has 2 colors, black and blue. Black is for cutting and blue is for engraving. Here in my city I found a place that sells and cuts MDF for a very affordable price. For the glass I needed a 45.66 cm by 49 cm cut. You can also change the glass for acrylic, but the glass was cheaper. For a much more accurate fitting I took the E2 part to the glass shop and asked for a cut that fits as close as possible. The screws I tried to use the same ones, so you'll only need M3 16mm screws, about 50 screws with nuts. You won't need all of them, but it's better to have more than not enough. It will also be necessary to use 4 M4 14mm screws to fix the power supply. Some 3D prints are essential for the printer to work, others are optional. When I had this idea, I thought that other people could benefit from this project, and for that I decided to make the PDF available for purchase, but not everyone will understand what I create. So I decided to put guides to make it easier to fit one piece into the other. Each piece has a big letter showing its name and small letters showing what piece should be joined. I tried not to put words because I wanted it to be easy to understand. I've tried to leave most of the guides on the inside or hidden so that the outside is not too distracting. Before gluing each piece, it's important to do a test fitting beforehand to make sure everything is right, then proceed with the assembly normally. First let's disassemble the printer. Let's start by taking the filament off. We start with these 2 screws. Then we need to remove the screws from the power supply. The third step is to unscrew the monitor. It's just these 2 screws. Unplug the cable on the back. We'll work on it later. The next step is to remove the motherboard. It has some screws that are difficult to access, having to move the base to access them. Removing the first 2 screws from the top, we need to remove the 2 screws from the front. Now we need to rotate the printer 90 degrees to access the bottom. Remove the 3 screws and remove carefully because the fan is attached to the motherboard. The next step is to unplug the cable fan from the motherboard. With the fan unplugged, now we need to remove all the cables that connects to the motherboard. If you have any concerns about reassembling the cables, it is important that you take a photo so that you can assemble it in the same way. With that we have our printer ready to be mounted in our enclosure. But we still need to disassemble some important components. Let's start with the motherboard. It has 4 screws that we need to remove it from its metal protection. The next step is to remove the fan. We also need to remove the monitor. And finally, we need to remove these 2 screws from the power supply. It will be a little loose, but let's make everything tight in the end. We have finished disassembling the printer, so let's start assembling our enclosure, starting with the fixed parts. Let's start with the motherboard. Using the V32 part we can fix the motherboard. You can notice that we have a lot more holes than necessary. They exist so that we can place the motherboard in 2 positions, vertically and horizontally. I left these 2 options in case you don't have a micro SD extension. You can place the card in a vertical position and have faster access to the memory card. Let's put the screws, turn and screw the nuts. Now we have our motherboard in its new home. The next step is to place the power supply on the V3 beam. The power supply is at the back. and the power button is close to the motherboard. Now we are going to assemble the printer monitor. It has 4 points to screw. After screwing, we place the control button. We finished the first part of the assembly. Let's start now with the assembly of the structure. Starting with piece A, we will fit beams V1, V2, V3 and V4. Before explaining the assembly, I want to show an error that the company that cut it made. The board was cut backwards, so the letters that should be cut facing downwards will be facing upwards in my demonstrations. The file itself is correct. That's why it's always important to do a dry run fitting test first to make sure everything is right. Now, let's fit each piece in its proper place, starting with beam V1, followed by beam V2, V4 and ending with beam V3 with our power supply. Fit everything and make sure everything is correct before gluing. The base looks pretty firm. We're ready to glue. Using the super glue, I start with the smaller beam, covering its entire length. Fitting in place, I wait a few seconds for the glue to take effect, and I move on to the next beam. After a firmness test, I will move on to the last two beams, starting with V4 and ending with V3. Important note, I leave the last 5 centimeters of every beam without glue so I can have a wiggle room to fit the other pieces. If I glue everything and make a mistake, it will be a little harder to fix that. Let's now glue part A3 on board A. This piece is necessary to hold the motherboard cover. Just glue the part in the indicated place. The base looks like this after being glued. Let's test the positioning of the printer on it. Attached to board A we have board A2, which serves to cover the access between the printer and the motherboard. For that we need to go back to the motherboard and glue another piece. On the motherboard we will use the second A2 board, but we will glue it horizontally so that the board can be fitted to the A board. Let's now place the fan on the V33 board and fit this piece on the second board A2. Now we have a perfect fit and we have openings to fit the cables. Let's now fit the walls. We have walls B, C and D. Before gluing, let's fit them all together to see if they fit easily. On wall D I noticed that a notch didn't cut correctly, so I'm going to take a piece to make it fit easier. That's it, perfect fit. Now the F-ceiling fit test. Some changes are needed, but the fit was correct in the end. Now let's test the front part. It doesn't have the name on the front, but it's part E. In this test, changes in the fitting were also necessary. Okay, now we know that the fitting is correct. Let's start gluing walls B, C, D and E. Let's leave ceiling F for later. Now that we have all the bigger pieces glued together, let's fit some smaller pieces. Guides GH1 and GH2 are used to hold the drawer in place. Let's glue this too. Before gluing the F-ceiling, we will glue the H1 beam first to have a better ceiling support. Now let's glue pieces D4 and D5 together to create the filament guide. On this guide you will use the Teflon tube with the piece that holds it and a nut to hold it in place. Before installing the ceiling F, we will fit the closing guide, I. To facilitate the alignment, it is necessary to use the screws and a little pressure to leave everything in its place. We are almost there. As you can see, now we are going to fit the ceiling F that has the ventilation holes with the walls B, C and D and the beam H1. Remember that all markings are on the inside of the case. After putting the super glue, we will put some weights to keep everything in place. Let's move on to the vent covers. There are 2 large ones and 2 small ones. We're going to glue one on the back of the other like this. This is the result. Let's fit it in to see how it turned out. Perfect. Let's fit the second guide, I, on plate E. This guide has 2 holes to facilitate the alignment. After gluing, we can fix it with some clothespin. Now we have 2 diagonal, I, guides to glue. Let's align these guides with the top and bottom 2, I, guides. To fix, we will use the clothespin again. And we finish the base of the printer. As you can see, despite being large, it is extremely light, which helps a lot if you are going to assemble it yourself. Let's fit the motherboard. For those who don't have a micro SD extension, you can have easy access with vertical positioning. Let's move on to the drawer. Starting with base G, we have 4 sides G1, G2, G3 and G4. Let's do the dry run fitting test, and then we'll glue everything together. I started with the walls, and after everything was glued, I fit the base G. There you go. Now let's fit the monitor mechanism. The K parts. Let's start with these 2 curved pieces, then glue the K1 and K2 pieces to the K piece, so we can screw them together with the monitor. For the monitor and power supply hinge, I created this piece, which you can print with a 1mm tolerance to capture all the details. We're going to use a piece of filament as a hinge and glue the 2 pieces together like this. Let's now move on to the door. Starting with part E2, we will fit the glass guide, the 2 L-shaped pieces. After aligning with the screws, we will glue them in place. Once dry, we will fit the glass and place the safety locks. Now we are going to fit the walls to the beam and the ceiling, always doing dry run fitting tests so that we can be sure that everything is correct. After knowing that everything is right, let's glue. We have finished the door. We are going to fit it to test that everything is in order. Perfect. Now we need to make our first prints in ABS or TPU. It is important that at least the filament holder and the printer shocks absorbers are made of ABS or TPU, because they will stay inside the heat chamber and PLA prints deform within this environment that can reach 40 degrees. So that the first prints can be made, I place these holes in the base so that we can momentarily fit the old filament holder. Our first print will be the new filament holder. Let's position the printer to be able to fit the cables with the motherboard. If this is your first time assembling a motherboard, suggest that you take a photo before reassembling each cable in its proper place. After connecting all the cables, we connect the fan and close this lid. As you can see, all the components are now away from the motherboard and it moves without any difficulties. Now we need to insert the power cable. We connect the cable to the power supply and we are going to do the first test to see if everything is in order. And the printer is alive. Ready to make our first print. Let's start with the filament holder. To print, we fit the door and let the printer do its magic. Then we will print these parts. Links to these parts are in the PDF. After printing these first prints, we will finish the assembly. We're going to put these dampening parts in the printer, so it doesn't resonate in the case. We take out the temporary filament holder and install the permanent one. Let's put the handle of the drawer on the lid and test the fitting. Now the most complicated part, the installation of the 180 degrees hinge. To be able to screw it on, I had to position the hinges with the screws. I rotated the cover to access the inside of the screws, added the nuts, and then tightened it as much as possible. This piece that I printed, if you don't have it, no problem. You can tighten it as much as possible by hand and then finish it off with the screwdriver. The printer is now with everything installed. As you can see, I installed a micro SD extension in it. To make it firm on the monitor, I made this piece that surrounds the product and I can glue it to the back of the monitor. And with that we finish assembling the Ender 3 enclosure. I would like to see your builds and the creations you can make with this super upgrade. In the description below you will find all the links to make this project and also links to my Patreon. What's the next project you think I should do? I was thinking about some legs for this beauty, or a project with internal lighting. Did you know that LEDs get very hot and it's not a good idea to leave them inside the enclosure? Put in the comments what you think my next project should be and I'll make a video for you, okay? The only question left to ask is, did you like this video? If you like my project and you think I deserve a subscription, just click on the button below, and if you want to be notified of upcoming projects, just click on the bell. Don't forget, you can create whatever you want. Goodbye.